Hello and welcome to our workshop today. My name is Nicole Dutterding and I am a social science analyst in ACF's Office of Planning, Research and Evaluation. I'll be your moderator today. And I work with colleagues in the Office of Family Assistance TANF Data Division and a great team of research and technical assistance partners on a project called TANF Data Innovation. The goal of TDI is to accelerate the analysis and use of data to improve the TANF program. So we're happy to have you here today. One part of this project is the TANF Data Collaborative, which worked with a set of pilot states to design and implement data analysis projects. The TDC pilots are about 18 months into a 30-month project period, and we're happy to share some of the lessons we're learning in TDC with you all today. You can learn more about us and find some great resources over at tanfdata.org. We have a really interactive program planned for you today. We encourage questions from you all, and note questions can be asked via chat during our discussion period or by unmuting your microphones. So on behalf of our team, I'll just say it's a pleasure to be here at the National TANF Directors Summit. We look forward to learning with and from all of you. With that, I'll turn it over to Bob, Emily, Emma, and Jenna from Chapin Hall to introduce themselves and lead today's workshop.
Thanks, Nicole. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Bob Gurga. I'm a senior research fellow at Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, and part of the team that Nicole mentioned on the TANF Data Collaborative. Emily?
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Wiegand, also from the Chapin Hall TANF Data Collaborative team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Monahan, and I'm also with the TDC team, and I've been working closely with Michigan, California, and Utah as pilot states. Jenna?
Hello, everyone. Jenna Chapman, Associate Policy Analyst here at Chapin Hall, also a member of the TDC team, and mostly just here for moral and technical support today.
So we're a cozy group today of those of us presenting, and looks like about 8 of you. So we're going to try to make it very interactive and talk together through this entire session. So we're in a couple minutes, we'll ask you to both respond to a poll and maybe also introduce yourselves since we're going to be together for the next hour plus. Next slide, please. So as Nicole mentioned, this is work that's part of the TANF Data Collaborative. And as part of that work, we're doing technical assistance to 8 states across the country. And we also did a needs assessment of all the states. We recently published a brief on that work, and I put a link to that brief in the chat just now in case anybody's interested. But today, we want to focus on the particular topic of sustainability. So we want to identify activities that can increase the likelihood of your TANF department building sustainable data analytic capacity. And around that, we'll talk about components of sustainability, kind of get your input on what some of those components are, and talk about a few that we've kind of prepared. We're going to, again, talk with each other and learn from each other about what each of you are doing, each of the states from you're from is doing around sustainability, and then wrap up at the end. We just, with the idea is that TANF agencies may have been involved in a project where it was a very data intensive project. Could have been an evaluation, some kind of outcomes research, some caseload dynamics, a new monitoring report, some project in which they broke out of kind of the regular reporting mode and used data intensively. And that may have been all internally done, and it may have been done with an external partnership. You may have used existing capacity to do that work. You may have pulled together a team not only from the TANF office, but also other parts of the agency to do that work. But regardless, is how you did it. The question is, how does it not become kind of a one-shot deal? How do you take the learning you got from that project, the capacity you relied on to complete that project, the code, the computer code, the data, whatever. How do you get that to keep around as a tool, as a resource to do more work like you've just done? So that's really the goal, is to talk through what the components are of sustainability. What are the activities and tools you can use to continue doing work like that, or be ready for the next time you want to do a kind of a data-intensive, data analytic project. Next slide, please. So this is going to be our first poll. We're going to ask a series of questions, and then we're going to look at the results. We don't have a big N here, so it's only 8. So we'll see what that looks like. But then once we look at kind of that, we'll also ask you to briefly introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your agency before going on to the next part of the presentation. So here are the questions. First one is just, what is your role? And pick the kind of obviously the best answer. Second one is just what type of program you come from. That could be any one of those. The third is looking at kind of the size of your program. Then fourth is a little bit about how you look at data within your agency. And then we're looking at, last thing, we're looking at kind of size of the staff doing data analysis. And Jenna, you'll let us know when you have.
Will do. I think we're just looking for a couple more people, currently at 6.
Someone may have jumped away from their desk, so we may want to just look at the
Sure.
6. And
Yeah, we're at 7, so if you'd like to proceed, we can go ahead.
Yeah, let's take a look. So primarily, we have the highest choice is leadership. So that's good. A few, maybe 14% might be one person. Policy or program, one person in data or IT, and a couple in others. Again, mostly state TANF programs and one tribal. I can't see the next ones.
You scroll down yourself.
I can, thank you very much. Mostly, the most common answer is 1,000 to 4,000 is a TANF program size. A couple under 1,000, one each, couple that are bigger. So we were really interested in kind of how often staff look at data. Mostly we have greater than 2 staff looking at data on a regular basis. And a few people 5 to 10, which is a lot. And then of this group. We have two big numbers, one 0 FTEs and the other is 2 to 4 FTEs. So that's a pretty big divide, and not having many FTEs dedicated to analytics will be an interesting part of today's discussion also. So at this point, since we have a small group, if we could quickly just go around and introduce yourself briefly, your name and what agency you're from, and maybe what your role is. I can kind of pick on people. Brian, I'll pick on you first. If Brian is there and not unmuted, but. Oh, well, we're going to go to Leslie then.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm Leslie, and I am from the state of Vermont TANF program. What else? I'm not sure what else you want to know. We're a pretty small state, so our data analytics team is pretty small.
That's great.
Interested to see what else we can do.
Thanks. Brad, since I can see you.
There, okay. Yeah, I'm Brad. I'm from South Dakota. I'm a program specialist, and again, our TANF program as well is very small, about 3,000 statewide. 300 mandatory customers, as we'd call them, who are required to be in the work program. So smaller than most cities across the nation, but yeah, we are really starting to look at analytics much more seriously the last year or two, and we're going to be getting a new computer program statewide in a couple of years, which will really enhance our opportunities to get quality data versus best guess data. So
Great, thanks. Thomas?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thomas Strand from ACF OFA, and I'm one of the 14% on the poll there, a small percentage.
Okay. Trin?
Hi, everyone. This is Trin, and I'm from California, TANF. Actually, our program, I'm a program policy kind of analyst, and I'm part of the tribal TANF unit, but we were under the, actually we still are, CalWorks, which is a, kind of California TANF. And we have a caseload. In California, we have one of the highest caseloads in the states, and about 300,000, over 300,000 cases. And we recently, only last year or so, that we really pushing towards the data analytics. And we actually created the RAD division, which is a research data analysis division. So in my particular program, we don't have a data analyst yet. So we just look kind of like, I think we're just kind of gearing toward that way. So it'd be great to find out more about that.
You mean the tribal program doesn't have an analyst? Is that what you meant?
The tribal program, we have a unit. We used to work both sides, CalWorks and Tribal TANF, but only recently that we're now more dedicated to Tribal TANF, and we're looking forward to kind of giving them more our special focus into Tribal TANF if we can. But meanwhile, we definitely want to learn more about the data part of aspect of it and learn a lot more about it to see how we can use that to help tribal TANF.
Got it. Thanks.
Mhm.
Jeremy? Jeremy may not be.
Jeremy did an introduction in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So he may
And it
not
looks-
have a microphone hooked
Thank
up.
you.
He said, I work at Tribal TANF in Northern California for 13 years. I do compliance and manage the database for the program. We serve between 100 and 150 families monthly. So it looks like Brian was also short a microphone and then came back in the chat and said he got one hooked up. So you can call on him again. And Jeremy, if it's possible for you to get a microphone hooked up, we're hoping to do a lot of discussion today because we can share things and certainly will from our experiences, but we're also hoping you all can begin to kind of share some of your own challenges and things that have worked for you or where you've struggled with each other. So to the extent that you can only engage in the chat, that's great. But for those of you who may be figuring out those technical things, and bonus points if you turn your camera on.
Brian, you're on.
All right, thanks. My name is Brian Campbell. I'm Chief of Staff and Policy Advisor for the District of Columbia. We have a TANF caseload of about, so kind of state, local, county, all rolled up in one. We have a caseload of about 14 or 15,000. And we've leaned pretty heavily into data and data analytics over the last probably 5 years. We got a new administrator about 5 years ago who set up a data team, which is still growing. It's not part of my team, but we certainly interact a lot. So I'd say I kind of missed how I was supposed to introduce myself in the presenting questions, but certainly leaning into data and using it more and more just across our entire enterprise.
Thanks. Zane?
Hi, everyone. My name is Zane Carey. I work with ICF. ICF is the subcontractor for this event. I'm just here to sort of sit in, learn as much as I can, and take some notes.
Great. Cassie?
Hi, I'm Cassie. I am with the state of Iowa, Iowa Workforce Development. I am a manager for all the case managers that are basically on the western edge of Iowa. In our service area, we have about 650 to 700 cases per month on average. Statewide, we're about 3,500 to 4,000. So.
Great, thanks. And last, is it Jennifer from Honoree DHS? Okay. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Bob, it looks like we picked up a couple more along the way. Will, I don't want to mispronounce your last name, Will, but Will from the Nebraska TANF program just introduced himself in the chat, and it looks like Caroline Morris is here as well. So do you want to have them do introductions too?
Sure.
Will, do you have a microphone? Are you able to speak?
Maybe not. How about Carolyn? Introduce yourself.
He said it does not work. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm a research assistant at MDRC, one of the TDC partners. I'm just listening in because I'm interested in hearing the presentation. So don't mind me. I'll just be here soaking in the information from you all.
Thanks, Carolyn. Next slide, please. So these are the components of sustainability that we wanted to discuss today. Documentation, we feel is critical to remembering, maintaining, having information, being clear about what was done. Communication internally, externally, is a way of not only expressing what was done, but creating a record of what was done. So actually, we include dissemination in communication. We've had that as a separate part, but we've kind of included it within communication as part of a specific part of communication. And hiring, training, and retention. I mean, it all comes down to people, having the people, the right people to do the work, continuing to develop people to do better work, more responsive work. So these are the 3 areas of sustainability. I wanted to just quickly ask whether or not anybody had any other kind of categories that they might think about under sustainability that might not be captured. We'll go into more detail on each one of these, but if there's anybody right now who's had any ideas about what else might come under sustainability other than these 2.
Anything burning you were hoping we would discuss today too?
If not, we have another poll, and we're going to let you kind of decide where we want to start in here. We can be very flexible on which of these 3 we kind of go with first. So whatever you guys choose, we'll be flexible, and we'll go with that one first. So we'll give you a minute or 30 seconds to do this one. It's not a hard one.
All right, according to my poll timer, that's been a solid 30 seconds, and we do have an early lead, so I'll share that with you all.
Okay, well, this is completely contrary to how we thought it was going to go, but that's just fine because it's our favorite one too. We'll go with documentation first, and Emily is going to present on documentation.
I always make jokes about how documentation is the vitamins one of these that nobody's that into. So I'm actually really excited to hear that that's something that's relevant and useful for you all. My first slide here is why is it important, and hopefully you have your own kind of motivating questions and ideas today. And I'm really here to support that and back that up. I think people tend to think about documentation, right? They say we have a lot of institutional memory that's caught up in people's heads, or if so-and-so leaves, we know nothing about the data, or we never got documentation from that contractor who built that report, and we don't understand how these things are defined. So it's this sense of documentation as we don't know what was done, and it's really hard for other people to pick it up in the future. And then this kind of corresponding feeling that I should be documenting my work, when I do something, when I finish it, so that someone can find it later. And that's great. That's clearly important, right? Those examples are compelling and pressing, but then we tend not to quite get the documentation done. So what I want to really add to the picture here is not just documentation as a matter of something that I should do and will be good for the future, or is good as a backup, but also kind of the role and the importance of documentation for the present and for the person who would be doing the documentation. So a couple pieces on that. One is if you are doing data analysis, designing an analytic process, managing data files directly yourself, having structures, having processes, places that you put things, naming conventions, ways you organize your notes, can make it incredibly helpful for you coming back later yourself, even after as much as just a couple days. I've had times when I've been working on an analysis and it's like I put it down on Friday, I come back on Monday, and which of these files do I need? So I think people tend to underestimate how much time you can spend even in your own work, especially on an analysis project where you tend to kind of go down one rabbit hole and then you come back and you go down another rabbit hole. So it really is a time savings, even when you're doing the work, to be very structured, to be very organized, and to be keeping good documentation. And then the other piece is, again, if documentation and that kind of structure and that tendency to write down what we're doing and why as we're doing it is a part of your practice, It brings kind of a reflective element to the work that you're doing. When you have to write down what you're doing and why, sometimes that causes you to realize that maybe you're not doing the thing that you need to be doing. Maybe the why and the what don't exactly line up, or maybe you've kind of forgotten the why and maybe this isn't the right direction for this time. So it's really easy with data analyses. You're in the weeds and trying to keep track of the big picture. It's easy to get caught in the weeds, and documentation kind of pushes you to pull that big picture. And done right documentation is all about connecting the detail here with the big picture needs so that someone can come in and quickly understand what's going on and to force you to keep thinking about what's going on. So that's a little bit of why if you needed a little more motivation. Next slide, please. Just want to pivot to the what. Hopefully you got some sense of this when I'm talking about the why, but that I'm not talking about here's a code book for our database. I know that for a lot of people that alone would be a godsend, but I really want to encourage you for purposes of this kind of conversation and for thinking about building sustainable capacity to think about documentation just really broadly, and to recognize that it's about documenting not just kind of the core data in the database, it's documenting analytic decisions, it's documenting scripts and commenting code. A big thing is documenting workflows. So understanding how an analysis was done. You know, this script was run on this data and generated this report. The reality is what you often have, even a relatively basic analysis, you'll wind up with a lot of different scripts or a lot of different parts of scripts. You'll wind up making a copy of the data and then you put it here and you edit it in this way. So really having all of that cleanly documented, where a data set came from. At some point, you're probably pulling an extract or a report from a database, and then maybe you're working with it in Excel or you're doing a different analysis. So as much as possible, writing those things down and making those things clear and transparent for you. Location of final products is one that I think it almost seems silly, except I think a lot of people have the lived experience of, oh yes, I can go back up and pull that result for you. And you open the directory and there's 7 files in it. And it's like, I'm not actually sure which one of these was final. So even as simple as that, when you talk about like basic time savings and keeping organized. So let's go ahead to the next slide. So all of this, I've sort of talked to some of those from the analyst lens, or maybe the person in working with the data. And it sounds like that's, for some of you, you may be in that experience. For many of you, you may not be, right? You're thinking about managing a team or building a team and doing this kind of work. And so I really want to emphasize that there's an individual component to doing good documentation practice, to having comments, to writing down what you're doing. But there's really a piece to think about here at a management level, kind of within a team or even within an organization. You can have great people doing great work and even documenting it really well. But if everyone builds their own system and has their own file, you have a little bit the worst of all worlds, where people are spending the time to make a great investment in documentation. But then if something happens to them or they leave, you still lose the institutional memory because nobody knows where their document is or how it's organized. So being really thoughtful and recognizing that this is a piece of building an analytic team, and that's thinking about things like, how do we organize our files? What naming conventions are we going to use? How are we, do we have like a template for documenting a workflow or for writing up analytic decisions? Do we put common headers on our code? So we'll talk more about strategies. We kind of like to draw some strategies from you all and hear from your own experience. And certainly we're happy to kind of generate more ideas as well. But I think that the more that you can have strategies that you kind of adopt in common, and that you agree and commit to as an organization and make a practice around, that's where documentation gets really powerful. And that's where it really goes from being a good analytic practice to something that's that makes a difference, that's building capacity, that's lasting and that's sustained and that's built into the organization. So that can look, we have a few things on here that, again, we can talk about if we have people who are interested, that are a little bit more sophisticated, code libraries, using version control software, something like GitHub or GitLab, creating wikis with data documentation. We can give some examples in those, but those are like a little bit the moonshot ones. Those are the, I have a big shop and like a lot of needs and I'm ready to build this out. And I think that sometimes there's excitement about those, but recognizing that even if you're not ready or looking for those, if it's just more like we're going to agree that we're going to consistently document these things associated with an analysis, we're going to use a document that lives in this location and looks like this, or we're going to always name our files to include the extract date. Even those simple things, if they're done kind of done large and done broadly and commonly adopted, can have even, you know, much more lasting power. So with that, let's go to the next slide. So we were going to go to breakout groups. Looking at our numbers today, I think we're going to stay in one group, especially recognizing that we have a couple of people who are having microphone challenges. But hopefully this will be fun anyway. So again, we'd really like this to be more of a discussion. If you want to turn on your cameras, that's great. If you don't, because you weren't prepared for that today, I understand and even just appreciate having you all participate. I think what I'd like to ask is maybe to have folks go around and share something that you would say you've tried, whether it's something that you're like, hey, we do this really well, or this is a documentation thing that we've really struggled with. And we tried it and it didn't work, but that sense of kind of generating some strategies from the group, and then maybe also raise a challenge, and maybe we can speak a little to each other's challenges. Do I have someone who's willing to go first and kind of suggest something that you've done, whether it worked or not, and something that you're kind of working with as an agency?
Sure, I'll jump in. This is Brian with DC. So one of the things that we have struggled with when it comes to, it's quasi-related to documentation, but it's documentation and accessibility of our policies and our program issuances. And
absolutely.
And so it come in a couple different forms. You know, one, just how we have the and we're not at a good place in this right now. We've gone through some different iterations. For a while, we had only one guy, Richard, who could update it, and then of course, when Richard's not there, it all gets log jammed up. But going back through and trying to making sure that clearly it's up to date. And so, you know, getting that element of it, and it all complements, but then it's trying to meet multiple different functions. One, is it searchable? Two, is it accurate? Clearly, and then I guess the third, well, going back to mostly accessibility. And finally, with accessibility, are we using it as we should, or are we simply relying on what we were trained on 6 or 12 or 18 or 60 months ago, and not going back and, you know, kind of double checking that policy because either it's just not ingrained in our habit, or, you know, we don't have time or whatever, or it's too hard to find.
That's great. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, and policy is a great side of this, right? Because you need it for practice, but then you also need it for analysis, because what the data mean at different time points is reflective of the policies and the procedures that were in place at those times. So I think one challenge that springs to mind that builds on that on the data side is documenting not just what's the current policy, but the policy history, which can be very, very challenging as well. So it sounds like you all have tried a few different systems that were, is it maybe just like saving things in a common location or having a document? Is there anything, you know, did you try like a SharePoint site, or what was sort of the infrastructure there?
Yeah, so kind of the program issuances, which should be tied to, ideally, you know, tied to a specific policy, that's, you know, on a SharePoint site, but then our policy manual it's online, so it's accessible for you as it is for me. It's on the internet, not the intranet.
Okay.
But again, a lot of it's, you know, an updating thing, and a lot of it's, you know, can I find what I don't want to find when I need to find it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Does someone else want to jump in?
I totally feel you on the policies. In Iowa, we're subcontracted through DHS. And so DHS has our control of all the policies in the manual, and we've been waiting for like 20 years to get the manual updated because they've just come up with memo after memo after memo of, you know, making edits. And actually we're finally in the process of getting this new updated searchable manual. So we're really excited about that. But honestly, our current, our biggest struggle is the new system that we started using for case management. The state of Iowa transferred over to Geo Solutions to kind of use for Wagner-Pfizer and unemployment and all that. And it's not at all case management friendly for TANF. And so our case managers are constantly having issues with not being able to upload documents, not being able to see documents, not being able to enter case notes, having to enter multiple case notes. As far as managers, we have issues with the system not being able to pull out data. So we're not able to run reports, and it's just it's a headache. So yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a great example of how a bad, any bad process, even if it's more advanced, right? And it takes all of these, it can do so much more, but if you're not doing anything right, it winds up worse than a simpler system.
Oh man, we had this dinosaur prehistoric system before it just, but you know, now today we've got this fancy new system, and it's like, gosh, what we wouldn't give to just have that dinosaur back.
Is there anyone else who's been through a similar process who has suggested strategy, you know, ways to get over that hump, or to get like, ooh, it's a tough one. All right, then Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in Vermont, we still have the dinosaur. So, you know,
is that your challenge?
It is. It's trying to extract data from that is really challenging, just to get the information that we're looking for out of it, because it doesn't even hold what information we're looking for. So we have information there, but then each department also keeps other information, and it's a spreadsheet here, a spreadsheet there, and there's no communication between them. We do have a SharePoint page now that is making it better, but I can definitely understand what you're saying, and we have those challenges too.
Can you talk a little bit more about your kind of what's gone well with the SharePoint site, and things that, what has that worked particularly well for? Where do you feel like people are kind of building on it, or, you know, what are some of the things that have gone into making that a success?
Yeah, people are still getting used to it, to using it. And that, I think, is been the biggest challenge with it, is just getting users who are confident with going in and finding the information and using it. But we're getting there, and there's a lot more information that we can find on there. So across programs, there's now we can find information that other programs have had, and we can access that, and instead of not being able to make that communication work.
Just having a place that everyone can access, and that they all know this is where I go.
Right.
And how is it updated? Is there like a control on that, or are people encouraged to update it?
Yes and yes. So yeah, there's not everyone can update it, so we do have it limited a little bit, and that way, just to keep the information current and
accuracy.
Yes, but yes, also people who do have access to that are absolutely encouraged to make updates and to keep the information current and relevant to the program. And it's had to change a lot over the past year and a half. You know, that information has to change because we've had to roll with what's going on. So
yeah, that may have helped get everybody on board, right? Because there's so much changing that they have to.
Right. It has actually forced people to go in and take a look at it and to try to get familiar with the site to use it more frequently, for sure.
Awesome. Others? Documentation challenges, successes, struggles?
This is Brad. And I first have to say, not knowing I was going to be on camera, I did quick put my conversation tie on, so at least to look a little more professional today.
Perfect.
But you know, we are also still using a system that I started using back in the 80s when I came to work for the state. But hopefully they tell us within about 5 years we'll be changing, but I'll be gone by then. But what happened was, you know, I mean, we didn't even have programmers that could fix the old system anymore. We had to bring people out of retirement. You know, you've heard those stories. So it's finally this last couple of years, I think I mentioned, we have started making an honest effort to reevaluate our data and at least try to pull data together. And, you know, we've just recently started using SharePoint, and we're so early in the stages, we're still developing our side of it. But our partners, Department of Labor, use SharePoint a lot and have good success with it. So we're trying to model some of what they've done, which will really help us. We also use Teams a lot in accessing files. And, you know, again, that's pretty new to us as well, the last 6 months. But, you know, there's a lot of good things that seem to be happening with that we can share and at least work on things together in the short term, for sure, anyway. The other thing that we're trying to do, I think, statewide, from what I understand, is, and I apologize, I can't think of the correct terminology, but in my case, you know, I'm looking to retire in the next 6 months, writing down everything that I do. And there's a term for that, and I can't remember what it is. But, you know, we're really trying to make an effort so that we can have consistency as people move on and move up. So those are, you know, some of the common things. But, you know, we're really, our concern is we are really trying to move TANF forward. And I was part of writing TANF rules in South Dakota, or got to be involved in it, you know, 25 years ago, and here we are back finally, you know, making some changes and I'll say modifying, updating staff thinking, and a lot of that is getting those numbers and that true data in front of them so they can see, here's what you do, how it impacts our customers. So that's where we're at.
Absolutely. Thank you. Several good ideas in there. Yeah, that might be a great time to transition to the kind of hiring, retention, onboarding topic. Does anyone have any last thoughts on documentation that they'd like to share?
I'll just pop one in, which is that we find that the sustainability of the documentation really is important, and it's great to have like high aspirations and design a system of all the things you'll do. We're also in the process of establishing SharePoint instead of our old network drives, and so getting people to change that behavior can actually be pretty hard. Things get busy, the new system falls apart, you still can't find anything, you know, all of that. So we're really finding it's about iterating on like that intention and then checking in and revisiting, you know, is this working for us? If it's not, how can we make it so that it's like the stripped down essential version of what we need to do, rather than all of the things that would be nice to do in an ideal world if we all had personal assistants or something, because we definitely don't have that.
It's like a snowball. You get the little bit rolling down the hill and it's a lot easier to build on. And if you sit there and you're like, but it needs to be this big, you'll never get anywhere. All right. Staff, that's you, Bob, right?
Yep.
All right.
So I think we're we're at risk of becoming a commercial for Microsoft here. So maybe we'll try to move a little forward. But I think what Brad said about, I think he was talking about his succession planning, is a common story. We, in our work in many states, we feel like we're doing a fire drill because the person's about to retire and we have to get everything we can out of their heads. And sometimes that's an impetus for documentation and thinking about that. But the other, clearly, the issues of hiring, training, and retention are key. As I said earlier, it's really all about people and people who want to use SharePoint or other tools. So why don't we go to the next slide? So these are aspects of hiring, training, and retention. You know, we all know that, especially around the data analytics, data science, quantitative people, that the corporate sector is hiring those people as fast as they can. You know, there are certainly challenges with hiring people into government at all levels, given the competition. And they're all not only competition, but there's budget issues, there's civil service issues, and there's a lot less flexibility in training. So we have to be very creative, right, about getting the people who are right for the job, or sometimes training up people who are in the job already. But on the hiring side, you know, attractive job postings, you know, and some of these job postings are circulated internally, right, within government, within your agency, and trying to find people who are interested in this type of work, to take Brad's job when he leaves, and to go on further. The other issue is also effective interview questions. Sometimes we're very limited on what we can ask. We've tried to work with states and actually give them questions, and sometimes even little tests to see how the skill level of people are before we hire them, before state agencies promote or hire people into next positions. But it's really important to around getting the right person to effectively interview them. Training is key, you know, on many fronts. There's more training available than ever before online, especially online during the pandemic. And even more specifically for public policy or government programs. You know, important thing is always that there's some context. There's different training has to be kind of somewhat specific. You know, we can't just we can do training on SharePoint, but training on other tools should be context specific at some point. And then there's, you know, the internal training. You can be a great programmer, but if you don't know how to access those tools in your agency, that's a problem. So how you onboard new staff, how do you transition them into new staff and give them kind of, what do I do now that I'm sitting with this computer in this environment with this data? How do I get to that point? So that the training is also critical. Retention, again, this is where the competition happens. It's often hard for government to be competitive on the salary side of things. And oftentimes the opportunities for professional growth or even the, you know, as Nicole mentioned, the culture around data analytics, the culture within the office around these issues, trying to affect the culture in a way that helps people like their jobs and stay in their jobs and want to learn more in their jobs. Sometimes this means connecting to other outside of the TANF agency to have a kind of cross-office, cross-agency group that's interested in data analytic issues. Sometimes it means having external partnerships, right? If oftentimes looking outside of the agency and getting another point of view from a research center or university or college staff. In some cases, we've actually suggested that agencies work with students, interns, because they can bring in new points of view, new ways of doing things that may or may not work with how things are going, but it's an opportunity to kind of bring in new thinking and sometimes also new tools at a reasonable price. Since we're getting pretty late into the session, we can go to the next slide. But we also wanted to, again, open it up to what you've done around hiring, training, and retention. What do you do to kind of keep the staff? Brad was also very important. I mean, how he preparing for the next person who's going to take his job in the future. But if anybody wants to offer kind of what additional challenges that I may have not mentioned, or about how they're trying to get the right people in the right jobs to do this type of work.
I'll mention one of the things in South Dakota here that they've finally done is opened up that I do not have to be sitting in Pierre, South Dakota to do my job. I can be anywhere in the state. So that really has opened up their pool of applicants tremendously for a lot of positions. There's some drawbacks, but overall that has really been I think an asset for administration.
Yeah, so being able to work remotely or other parts of the state is a big deal. Any other thoughts?
In Vermont, we've started to use summer internships quite a bit just in the past couple of years for some bigger data projects that we had, and that was really successful.
And how did you advertise? Did you advertise to specific universities, or did you have somebody? How did that happen? Where do you source those interns?
We did, just a general posting of an internship with some, I think even just Indeed, some really big job postings. But we also did reach out to the local universities in our area and let them know what we were looking for. We went specifically to the departments that we were looking for. We went to, we really reached out to statistics departments and offered it that way and let them know that we had those opportunities if they had students that would be looking for that.
Thanks.
Sure.
In Iowa, we don't have much control over the job listing itself, and so that can be kind of an issue because the Department of Administrative Services makes it quite lengthy, and often we get applicants who don't quite understand what the actual job entails, as a case manager or TANF case manager. But other than that, we've got, once people get in and understand the job and they become to love it and they stay. And so we don't have any issues with retention, but we do struggle with that learning curve. It's a good 2 years for a case manager to fully understand the program and all the details in it. And then they all seem to go through that phase of really trying to work with our population. We work with a very difficult population, you know, and going through that phase of not getting burnt out or not putting more effort into the work than the participant. So I think for me, that's the biggest struggle, is getting them through that phase.
Yeah, I think your comment brings up something I didn't mention, was that, I mentioned a little bit before, that when you're hiring for a data analytics position or any position in a social service environment, you're looking for both that substantive knowledge, right? You want people to know something about the policy area or the whatever skill they need, as well as the technical information. So that's really hard, right? It's hard to balance. It's hard to find a person who has a high level of both substantive knowledge about a particular program area as well as the technical knowledge. So oftentimes you have to you get one and you train on the other end. So you kind of have to make that trade-off at times. Any other challenges or successes around hiring, retention, and training?
I would just add something that Emily and I have talked about in the past about hiring for these roles, because we need to hire for them in the federal government, and like you all need to hire for them too. These sort of like BA or master's level analyst roles, and kind of how do you really identify who's someone who's going to hook in and really thrive in the environment? And Emily said something to me once, that she looks for people who are pickers, like people who see something that's not quite right and are like, I need to figure that out. That's a different skill even than like what you're necessarily trained in the statistics master's program or something. And so in thinking about who's going to be satisfied in a job in an agency where a lot of the challenges are data wrangling challenges, figuring out like what the quality of the data is and what are the things that don't make sense, because that might actually be due to some really important policy that without that knowledge, you're going to produce analyses that come to the wrong conclusions. So I think one of the ways that we do this in the federal government is we have folks come in as contractors first, so on contract positions first. And it takes so long to hire a Fed that you get to do some of that training during that time, but also figure out, is this a fit before you commit someone to a federal role where, you know, they're there for a really long time. So we struggle with that here too.
Yeah, I thought you said Emily was looking for banjo players. So we have just 15 minutes left. So I do want to hear if anybody else has anything to add, but we also have one more area that Emma will cover around communication. But if anybody has want to add, please do at this point. Okay, Emma.
We went in the complete opposite order that we had set up the slide deck, so I am certainly glad that we asked. So I am going to talk a little bit about communication. I'll go pretty quickly so we have time to talk about strategies you all have used, and we have a couple slides at the end we want to get to as well. But communication, why is it important? You know, Leslie, I heard you mention that there are different departments holding different data elements, and sometimes you're looking at each other's spreadsheets, sometimes you're not, right? And that's kind of the communication that we're talking about here, right? It helps foster learning and build knowledge across teams, across units, right? That's only going to make your agency better, your whole department better. It lets people know what's going on in different areas and on different teams, which can help reduce the duplication of effort. Right? If someone over here has figured out that issue with unemployment data and you want to use it now, right, it's worth talking to each other to see if you can just learn from that or pick up from the work that they've already done. There's also, you know, communication with frontline staff or people actually working with families, right? This can really help facilitate their input on what you might be seeing in the data, on what the case management system is actually doing, right? And that will help, like Nicole was just mentioning, a lot of this is data quality stuff. And so that can help identify some of those issues earlier on, right? If you're just having those conversations and communicating things you're learning regularly. It also can really help promote buy-in, right? So if you're consulting with people who maybe aren't the actual analysts or on your analytic team on a regular basis, be that program and policy folks and leadership, especially even from the initial design phases, right? They'll feel invested in the work, they will help you make it better, and that can just really improve the work overall. And then of course, then the more you're communicating, right, the more your current work will be connected to future work, and the more people around you know what's going on. So what do we mean by communication, right? It can mean a lot of things. There's communication across disciplines and roles, right? So be that from the analyst up to leadership, or analyst to program and policy folks, across levels of authority, across experience levels. Of course, when we're talking about transitions, for example, right, there's going to be a lot of communication between the people who have been there for a while and the new hires. And it's also important to think about communicating with frontline staff who actually collect data, or people who are designing the system, right? And there's just lots of points of communication that can really help the analytics piece and the understanding of the data. Some strategies that we thought about for improved communication, but again, we'll pause here to hear from you all. You know, there's reviewing code and documentation. Emily kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, right? The extent to which we can work on that collaboratively and across people of experience levels and skill levels, right, can really help improve the work. We think it's important to try to, you can formalize touch points across diverse teams, right? Whether that be a regular monthly meeting between the program and policy folks and the data analysts to either check in on how data queries have been going, or what this report says that you just ran, right? Having those kind of regular check-ins helps both of you understand each other's work more, right? And also can just help catch anything as it's coming up and improve the work that way as well. When it comes to involving stakeholders, right, you could think about designating advisory boards. You can identify important project milestones that you'll say, okay, once we get to this point, we're going to bring it to this group for feedback. And it also can help you prioritize dissemination planning, right? So a lot of the communication piece is also this dissemination piece, which is, okay, we've done this analytic project, we have these results, who do we need to share it with, right? That's probably leadership, it's probably frontline staff, maybe it's gonna go on your website, but you know, thinking about that ahead of time and how you disseminate that work is really important. And dissemination itself is really important, again, to kind of promote that buy-in and to help sustain the work, right? Because once people see, oh, that was a really cool thing that you did, we should do more of that, that can help build momentum for that work moving forward. So I'll pause there. And are there anything you all do, right, similar like we've discussed before, that kind of facilitates this type of communication, or types of communication you wish you were doing more of?
So we've started probably in the past year or so. We call them vetting groups. Any kind of decisions we're making, policies we're working on, processes that we're working on, we tend to get our frontline workers and try to get a group of them together and talk through what's going on. What do they see that maybe as a frontline worker isn't going to be the right information that they need, and that's been really positive. That has definitely helped with buy-in and helped really work out any pitfalls that we have before we get there, before it's live. So it's been really great.
I really like, you said you call them vetting groups.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, right. I mean, that's the idea, right? That we all work within our own teams and we can be siloed, right? And the extent to which we can get other people's eyes and feedback can help work out some kinks and, you know, before early in the process, right? Instead of way down the road when you build out this whole thing that then isn't right. So
right.
That's great.
Yep.
I know I will just say from the experience with the TDC work, which are these pilot states, right? A lot of these teams that we work with are program and policy folks and data folks who have not historically worked together very closely, right? And now we're in a meeting bi-weekly or monthly, or even more often than that, having lots of conversation about program and data at the same time. And there's just been so much cross-learning of, oh, I didn't know that's what was happening in the policy, and that makes sense. That's why I'm seeing these things in the data. And really, you know, we've heard that across the board about how much people on both sides have been learning just from this regular communication. And so while this is a special project, right, that's helping facilitate that, we do hope that it's something that will carry on into the future. Any other thoughts?
I just wanted to mention that, you know, external, we didn't talk a lot about external communication, but external, you know, putting stuff out for the public is very difficult. You have to have everything done exactly the way all your superiors want it done. But it's a way, it's a strong way to have a strong impetus for sustainability, because it's out there and people see it and they might want it again. And so it's not just kind of an internal process of keeping things going, but it adds kind of an external aspect to legislators, advocates, other government agencies wanting to, hey, you did that once, can we do that again? And kind of that kind of piece. So you can't underestimate the importance of kind of external communication to keeping things being another factor in keeping things rolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. We only have 5 minutes left, so I think I'll go to that last slide, which is, we just wanted to touch at the end on planning for sustainability. So I think really early on, someone said something about, you know, you're trying to figure out what's going on, but you simply don't have enough time. And that is one thing that ideally, right, sustainable data practices will really help with. And while Emily often says it's the last thing anyone wants to think about, like particularly documentation, if you're in the middle of a project, you don't feel like writing down everything that you're doing. But doing that can save you so much more time later on. And that really prioritizing these practices, like Nicole said, you kind of have to make it little things that you start doing regularly and that get into your workflow. So making those little chunks of time throughout the project and early on and really prioritizing that can really help down the road. We also think just setting goals or touch points, right, where you're going to just check in on, okay, how is this practice going? Are we meeting those goals that we wanted to around being these sustainable practices? Are we documenting like we had hoped? That can help you kind of check in on how the process is going and keep yourself accountable. And then again, communicating up and down, right, the levels within your team specifically and in your agency on why this is important. I think it can, I know personally for me, right, I don't realize how important it is until I'm leaving a job, for example, right? Or until, oh, someone asked me 2 months later how I got that table produced and I have no idea. And so just constantly re-emphasizing, right, like why it is important and how much time it's going to save, how much effort it will save, and why it's worth doing now. Are just things, and like we've talked about, right, it doesn't have to be the huge snowball, but just the little things that you can start building in now will really help down the road. So are there any last questions or thoughts?
Well, I just want to say that in our program, what we do is we try to do like a desk manual where you have to write down what you're doing. And it's very tedious. Oftentimes you don't, like you say, you don't have time. I really don't have time for this, to write all of this down, but it's something, it's important to like sort of be part of the onboarding where, you know, for new staff to come in and getting down the process. So that's something that we try to do or continue to push for us to do. And we constantly, in our program, we also do work groups. So in work groups, we invite stakeholders like the advocates, the county administrators, county program specialists to kind of going to work on projects that we have, like improving forms, applications online, things like that. Any projects that would that we would need input to make a better, better outcome or result or whatever what we need to do for the project. Yeah.
That's great. I love the sound of a desk manual, right? Of this is how you need to be documenting and do it every time. That's great.
Yeah. And I want to touch on the whole data, and I understand the whole data and program issues is that when you hire somebody, it's completely data, but does that person understand the program? And the most recent years, in the last 2-3 years that, actually maybe this past year, that they really pushing training program analysts and in general programs about data. So we have trainings that we can get on and to introduce us about data, so that kind of get us to get used to the whole idea of data. And then at the same time, if data side, if they don't understand anything, they contact programs, and then we have like a little sessions where we can talk to them and like kind of help them understand where we are at. So that's, we're trying to bridging the gap between that program and data.
That's great. And do you feel like those have been really helpful? Like what's the feedback you're getting positive on those types of sessions?
Well, for me, I think it's important for us to moving like kind of to be in the middle like that, because before we see the program issue, we see the trends or whatever the caseload management that's showing the problem, but yet we don't have the data. So before we don't have the data, we didn't have the data, we didn't have anything to track of anything. I understand, like in my program area, I know specific, there's a problem, but then we have never tracked the data, so we wouldn't know what to do. So we have to collect the data. So we have to go back, ask counties to give us data, so then we can see the trends and all that stuff. So so it's something that it's important for both data and program to really be mindful and be aware and bridging that gap, because it kind of helps both sides, because then data will need the program knowledge, and program needs the data side. So in order to understand what's going on with our program and where best, which direction should we be heading, how can we be helpful to our to families and people in California. So
absolutely, thank you.
Well, I think that is a great closing comment, because this is all about using the analysis we're doing to help improve the lives of the folks we touch. So I want to thank everyone for their participation, and